Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Luongo, and it's a privilege and a pleasure to once again be able to bring you a webinar that's out of our series on ukulele instruction. We started it during Believe in Music Week, and I'm just so grateful to NAMM Foundation, to Eric, who's here as our senior project manager and producer, to Mary Lurzan from the NAMM Foundation for giving us a chance and a voice about ukulele instruction. And today, I'm particularly pleased to be able to welcome back a longtime friend, a former student, and a great voice and participant in the instruction of ukulele discussion. Please welcome to the studio, James Hill.
Hi, Peter.
How you doing, James? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. I like your shirt.
Yeah, it's a good thing that we got the memo on the color. That's really good.
Yeah.
It goes nicely with the orange in the background there.
Yeah, thank you. I try. I really do.
No, I know James.
You know me.
I was expecting plaid today, but anyway, that's another matter.
I like to switch it up.
James and I have known each other for 30 years. That's 3/4 of his life and not 3/4 of mine. James was in the Langley School District and taking ukulele instruction at his elementary school. He had an opportunity to audition for the Langley Senior Ukulele Ensemble, which I was directing, and the rest is history. What folks out there won't know is that James's family and our family have become very close and very much appreciative of one another. James's mom and dad were both educators in the Langley School District. James's dad was a fellow administrator with me. James's mom actually was working out of my last school that I was principal of. James's sister, who's a terrific talent, a great musician, living in New Zealand and actually is an opera singer, was also in the Langley Ensemble. So the connection between our two families and the connection between you and I, James, is something that is certainly a real treat in my life and our family's life. Obviously, Mark, our oldest son, is very good friends with you as well. And it's really cool that we could get you involved in this discussion, dating right back to the time that we did the January session that involved instruction of ukulele and several other folks in the business. So just to frame this a little bit, talk to us a little bit about that earliest experience that you had getting into playing the ukulele.
Well, yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on the show. This is fun. It's great to be invited and to be part of this initiative. When I think back to early days of playing the ukulele, it wasn't something that I set out to do. It was something that happened to me, which is something that is different from a lot of the ukulele stories that I hear. When I teach adults, for example, they're often coming to it on purpose later in life because they're looking for something and they're trying to find it through the ukulele. That's very different from the way I started. I started in the grade 4 classroom. I was handed an ukulele along with everyone else in my class. It was almost like, here's your pencil, here's your eraser, here's your ukulele. It was just part of school. I didn't think it was weird. I guess some part of me thought that everybody just played ukulele. Wouldn't that be a great world to live in? So that's how I started. It was just you had to do 2 years before you transition into the band program. So it was pre-band, and that was how I started. It was very inauspicious, and I had no idea it was going to become my life's work.
How did it end up sort of fit in? Because I know you're also a violinist. Your family obviously greatly valued music education. How did this fit in the context of your music education as you went through playing?
It's a good question. I mean, I was just doing music all the time. I think as a kid, I didn't compartmentalize it. I think looking back on it, I'll say, I had more of a classical, rigorous upbringing through the Langley Community Music School, where I was doing violin and orchestra and programs like that. But with you and with Jamie Thomas and through via Chalmers Doane, it was more of an exploration of the the open-ended side of music, where it was more based on folk music and popular music and jazz. And my exposure to non-classical music came for a long time almost entirely through the ukulele. So I guess it fit in the sense that it didn't fit in to everything else that I was doing, and it was that outlet and that vehicle. I have to say, for everybody listening, if you're not really familiar with how the ukulele was and is used as a pre-band instrument, as a stepping stone instrument, I don't want to give you the wrong impression. Like, the idea was not that you would stay with the ukulele. The idea was that was the fire starter, and for me to devote my life to the ukulele and to never really get over it. I never really got over it. I never moved on. It's like, it'd be a bit like a person devoting their life to the tricycle. Like, that's, and maybe you could take it to a high level and do some fancy tricks, but hey, like, why didn't you just get a bike? There's but that's just the way it went for me, and I've enjoyed it every day.
Yeah, you progressed from 3 wheels to 2. Yeah. Wait a minute. And then to 4 and a steering wheel 5. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
It is interesting you mentioned it. And for our listeners, the notion was, and this was the brainchild really of Chalmers Doan talking to a gentleman named Ray Featherston, who was our music supervisor for educators in Langley, who said, you know what, if we start with a Kodai program in primary, we build to an instrumental approach that is the ukulele used in those middle elementary school grades, and then progress to band and or choral programs, we would give a solid foundation to learners of music. And so, a student who came with previous piano or violin training was a bonus. But the vast majority of our kids were getting music as an experience in their lives through the ukulele, through the Kodai program, through a chance to progress in a band. So in the truest sense, this was offering a chance to learn a life skill, to learn how to make, create, play music in the context of having it there as part of your life to round you out as a person. Mm-hmm. So in that context, James, you obviously ran with it. And I'm curious, at what point did you recognize that, did it flip for you that you said, I'm staying with the tricycle?
Yeah. I don't know if it was one moment in particular, but I'd say, you remember when you took that year off?
Yes.
Right? That was 96?
96, yep.
Right? Because that's the year my family and I spent in New Zealand. My mom was doing an exchange, and doing a extra training down there. So we spent the year over there, and you guys continued with the group. You guys took the year off,
yep.
Right? And it was during that year that a lot of things changed for me. I had taken a guitar with me that I was learning at that time. I was trying to move on from the ukulele. It didn't really stick, but at that time I was playing guitar. That allowed me, I was very introverted, pretty shy kid. That allowed me to make friends on my first day of school, very first day of school, in a brand new place, in a place where I sounded different than everybody else. Because of music and because of what I learned on the ukulele, I integrated immediately into a social group because of music. I started teaching music privately that year. I had my first students. I had no method books. There was no internet. I actually hand wrote a method book to teach out of. These were really formative times for me. Those 12 months, I was learning like I'd never learned before. There was all this sort of snowball of stuff that I picked up from you and from Jamie and from all of our experiences together. But now I was kind of flying on my own and having to make it up as I went along. And so I came back from that year, back into the group. Everybody was refreshed and had a new energy and a new direction. And now I was bringing all that stuff that I'd learned abroad back into the ensemble. So that moment coming back into the ensemble in whatever it was, 97 maybe.
Yep.
For me, that was kind of everything was different after that. And it wasn't long before, I think it was only a year after that my dad said to me, my dad, he just loves to have ideas. And it can be really frustrating sometimes. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yep.
And he said to me, you know what you should do? And I really can't stand it when he starts a sentence with, you know what you should do.
A typical father-son relationship
Oh
the day after Father's Day. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. And he came to me and said, you know what you should do? You should record an album of all ukulele music. And I honestly thought that's it. He's cracked. It's the single worst idea he's ever had, and he's had quite a few, like humdingers.
Yeah.
And so and it wasn't 12 months after that I actually found myself in the studio doing the first album, because he was right. So I'd say that was kind of where it switched for me, that sort of mid to late teens.
Yeah, and that was Flight of the Bumblebee.
Yeah, that was the first track on the first album.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, you know what? We got more of that. I know that behind the scenes, we've got Eric queuing this up. This is a video, a YouTube video that I think everybody has seen. But you know what? We're going to give you one more look at it. This is the amazing James Hill, Billie Jean.
Ukulele is magical. It brings out something special in the song, and it brings out something special in people.
James, I know there are millions that have seen that. You use the word, it's magical. Let's talk about the magic. What are the possibilities available when you choose to play the ukulele?
Well, that's an open-ended question.
Yeah, that's why I asked it.
Okay. Well, magic is a hard thing to pin down, but I will say I kind of see it in two streams of magic. There's the kind of technical and musical magic, right? There's some of the stuff that I'm doing in that clip, like, oh, hey, what would happen if I bang on it like this, or if I arrange this song on it? There's all that sort of what I would very lovingly refer to as sort of like deep nerd territory. There's magic to that. And I felt that one of the reasons I stayed on the tricycle was because I felt there were doors that had never been opened here. Whereas with so many other instruments, that are much, much older and have had much richer histories, there wasn't as much to say. I didn't feel there was as much room for me to say what I wanted to say on the violin, or to say what I wanted to say on the guitar, for example. And so I felt that the openness and the non-judgmental sort of landscape that was inviting to a young artist who wanted to make a statement, that was incredibly attractive. And so I went with that, and there was a lot of magic just technically. What could you do that couldn't be done before, that hadn't been done before? So there's that kind of magic. But there's also like the magic that I think everyone can relate to, which is more like a sort of social magic, because the instrument is so inviting and unintimidating. And and you've heard this many, many times. Everybody talks about how it's so inviting and unintimidating. But specifically for me as a teenager, we used to talk about the guys in the ensemble, right? Mm-hmm. We used to talk about the ukulele loophole. Mm-hmm. And what we meant by that, the way it manifested for us as young men was here was this ensemble that we were part of, the Langley Ensemble. And there were, 6 guys, or maybe 7, or depending on the year. And there were like 15 of the most beautiful, talented young women from the entire school district. Yep. And here were the 7 nerdiest, shyest, geekiest little uke nerds. And we got to hang out with all these wonderful young women all the time, go on bus tours, go on, to Hawaii, go overseas. and this was like, we'd just look at each other sometimes in rehearsal and kind of like nudge each other and say like, hey, ukulele loophole. It was like, we couldn't believe our incredible luck.
Yeah.
And although it might not play out like that for everybody, there is something that says, when I'm holding this instrument, I have access. It's almost like a key. I have access to this social environment or this social group that I may never have accessed before. That is some magic as well, and it's real magic that everyone can relate to.
Yeah, it's a bit of a self starter of an instrument, as we know from our time in teaching, especially with adults now. And so when you're playing it, there aren't preconceived notions of what you can do. So your Billie Jean is an example, but if you go right back to the ensemble times, we would play a piece, big band piece by Glenn Miller. We would do the William Tell Overture. We would perform, Johnny Be Good on the ukulele. And all of a sudden what you had, and this is pre some of the big names that have come out. We're talking literally 40 years ago, 35 years ago. And what we were doing was exactly what you're describing. We were saying, look at the possibilities of this instrument. Look what can be done with it. And by unlocking that, we're starting to give that sense that, okay, there's more here. What else could we do? Mm-hmm. And just that sense that when I pick up the instrument as a teacher, that I don't have to be constrained by, well, this is what you're supposed to play. Mm-hmm. As a student, I don't have to be constrained by, this is all you can do on the instrument. Mm-hmm. Which, if you think back, I mean, some of the great George Formby's, the playing that they would do was just, Roy Schmeck, the strum technique, the chording that they would do was incredible. And yet, most people picked it up as, I'm going to strum these chords and I'm going to accompany it with voice. Mm-hmm. And yet, look what's happened. Look at the Billie Jeans. Look at the different options that have been out there. So, to the teachers that are out there, go with it, run with it.
Well, and that's exactly it. Because in the teaching community that I have helped to foster, which is the JHUI teaching community, JHUI stands for James Hill Ukulele Initiative. So right. Obviously everybody shortens it and just calls it JHUI. Yeah. Hui also coincidentally means, it's a Hawaiian word that means either the chorus of the song or a group of people, working toward a cause. So it's a really nice tie-in. So the JHUI is the teaching community that I have been involved with now for over a decade. And what's amazing in that community is the flexibility within the structure that we've created. Yeah. What I mean, as an example, is it would be very unusual to show up to a Suzuki recital, a Suzuki piano or violin recital. And believe me, I have a ton of respect for Suzuki. I grew up in the Suzuki right. program. I think the world of it. But it would be very unusual to show up to a recital of Suzuki students and to hear them writing their own introductions, creating harmony parts, bass lines, and their own outros and endings. That would be highly unusual, and I've never seen that before. And yet what we have in the JHUI community, using the ukulele in the classroom materials that Chalmers and I wrote, is we have a structure that says, at very least, do this. You're going to do no harm if you do these steps. But here are some creative exercises that you can bring to the class or the private lesson to expand your students' creative horizons. Here are sort of modular bits of creativity that you can mix into the lesson and sort of add on to that sort of static core of resources with some changeable additions. And this is cool because what happens now within the community is that people will start to share their little bits that they've added on to the existing arrangement. Say, hey, Peter, can you send me your intro for Rocky Mountain? I'd like to try it with my students. Now we have this community of this sharing community, and the currency that they are sharing between one another are these small musical objects that they can use in their own teaching. To me, that's just really exciting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, this plays to the notion that as a teacher, as an educator, or as a player, that you're not constrained by a specific curriculum or specific syllabus, that you can choose materials that you like, so long as two things are true. You as an educator have the proficiency with the instrument and with a sense of where you're going, so that it's intentional. Mm-hmm. That the skills that you're sharing with your students, or as a learner, the skills that you're acquiring are incrementally going to lead you to improvement and or to a greater understanding of music literacy.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, I agree. But I will say that music literacy, you don't want to make that assumption that is the end goal. And we've talked about this before, but like when I first start working with teachers, they're often overwhelmed by the possibilities. That, by the way, is a nice new change. Back in the late 90s, it was the opposite. People were overwhelmed by the lack of resources. So I was always getting emails saying, where can I find anything? Now I'm getting emails saying, I found so much, you have to help me parse it out because I'm overwhelmed by the possibilities. When I first start working with teachers, to get them some kind of sense of direction, some kind of compass, I always lay it out in a very simply and say, look, if you answer one relatively simple question and you're clear about this one simple question, you will always know your magnetic north as a teacher. And that one simple question is, are you teaching ukulele or are you teaching music? Now, at first that seems almost nonsensical, but the more you think about it, the more important that is. If you're teaching ukulele in and of itself, as an end unto itself, that's one thing. You're going to have a set of resources that you're going to use, and your answers to little nitpicky questions like, should I use tab? What tuning should I use? What size is right? Should I do private lessons or group lessons? What is the right repertoire? All those little nitpicky questions are solved pretty quickly if you know that you're teaching ukulele as an end unto itself. However, if you decide that the ukulele is a vehicle and you are teaching music ultimately, you're going to have a different set of answers to those nitpicky questions that people love to argue about in online chat forums. You might make a different decision about tablature. Maybe you'll use standard notation instead. With the tuning, you maybe won't use the high fourth string. You would use the low fourth string because it simplifies and clarifies the structure of scales and chords. You'll probably use arrangements across the board from classical to folk to pop and all that stuff. You might have more ensemble arrangements than you would if you were teaching ukulele just as an end unto itself. Okay, suddenly we start to see there's a spectrum of teaching that in a simplified way, I think can be laid out between those 2 points. Now, if you know where you are on that spectrum, your life as a teacher is going to be infinitely more infinitely simplified,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And those decisions aren't going to be as arduous. Now, I will say your position on that spectrum can change over time and does. Mine has significantly over the years. I've gone back and forth, and that's great, but I always know where I am.
So you and I both deal or work with adults and children. I clearly have identified for me where that sits. My intention is to, in fact, bring about that life skill that is music literacy. Whether or not anybody ever becomes a James Hill is really, that's not something that I'm going to intentionally affect. I'm hoping that someone leaves the instruction that I'm involved in with them so that they are more proficient at understanding how music works, and that, as I often quote, I'm teaching you to fish rather than handing you the fish. I'm giving you some ability to learn how to play, to understand what it is that you're doing, so it leads to what you want to do. As the learner, you can choose from there how you want to proceed. When you, James, I know you have a number of initiatives, everything from the teaching piece to the recording and performing, so the complete spectrum is within your purview. What are you finding from the students that you work with, the prospective teachers that you're teaching? Is there sort of a sense that you get of whether it is the instrument that is appealing to them, or whether you're seeing a greater tendency towards, no, I want to learn about music. I want that background in my life?
Well, that's a great question. It is hard to say, but my feeling in the community is that teaching the ukulele as an end unto itself, that's what the instrument just does out of the box. It's like you unpack it, boom, you're going to have a good time. You're not necessarily going to prepare a student to transfer those skills to the flute. You're not necessarily going to prepare them with transferable skills to then go and play piano. But man, you're going to have a good time, and you're going to do no harm. And boom, that's sort of like the natural starting point for the ukulele. As teachers become more curious and as they become more skilled, I find they start to gravitate toward the other side of the spectrum and say, well, I could teach, Handel's Water Music in 3 parts. Maybe I should try that. That'd be fun. Oh, I could teach jazz standards on the ukulele. That could be fun. It's the curiosity that starts to move the needle a little bit. That doesn't mean that one is better than the other and that you should enter at one point and you should have it as a goal as a teacher that, I want to get over there. But it does seem to be the natural flow of things, that people come in at that entry point and they, through curiosity and experience, they move to the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I look at you and both our sons, Paul and Mark, both started with the ukulele and actually on your own learned to play the guitar, on your own develop, in Mark's case, to play the string bass. It was very much a transition based on what I understand about this instrument and how it fits. I can transfer that knowledge, as opposed to Ray Featherston's original vision, which was you'll learn to play the ukulele and then we're going to hand you a flute, a trumpet, a trombone.
Right. Which was really Chalmers' original vision. And a lot of people forget that although he's remembered for being the ukulele guy, for him, what he wanted to be was he wanted to be the first public school symphony orchestra guy. That was his intention, was to go there. He's remembered for his fire starter, which was the ukulele. But I will say, to finish that thought, in the context of the pandemic and all the isolation and the mental health ramifications of that, I have found myself in the last 2 years moving back from teaching ukulele as a vehicle for music literacy and the rigor that goes with that. I love that style of teaching, but I've found myself drifting back toward the magic of teaching ukulele in and of itself, without any idea of where it might lead, just to help people create a bubble of joyful noise around them. That drowns out some of the noise that is less joyful, that they're constantly being bombarded with every day. I've started to really appreciate the value of the ukulele as in that way as well. So I'm not the only one working at this. I did put out a free method early on in the pandemic called A Piece Like an Ukulele. Still up there on uketropolis.com. It's free. It's a piece of music that's written to be a meditation where you play. It's written in several repeating cells so that you never have to feel rushed to move on to the next part. You never have to feel like you're getting it wrong. You just play it over and over for yourself. When you're ready to move to the next cell, you move on. It's a very peaceful exercise that puts you in a different state of mind. Daniel Ward has released 2 books of ukulele meditations. One of my students, Catherine Goikman, has been really active in guiding people to use the ukulele for relaxation. This is something that I've become increasingly interested in, and it has very little to do with music literacy, and yet it's extremely valuable.
Well, you mentioned COVID and you mentioned the instruction, and of course both of us have continued to present music instruction right through this time, and I can tell you I just wrapped up a course where a number of the participants said this has gotten me through COVID. And whether it's a piece like an ukulele that is giving that sort of individual opportunity, or it's taking part in something that gives folks purpose between sessions to practice a way to use time. I have to say how grateful I've been to the ukulele community at large, to the teachers that are out there that have chosen to use this time to stay connected to students. I can't tell you how much that feedback has come, that it's been appreciated by folks that they could take part. I know I speak to Kala ukuleles on a regular basis, and they've said that sales of ukuleles have been incredible during the pandemic. So the good news is that there's tons of learning going on. Mm-hmm. And with that as a bit of a switch, I'm going to get Eric to set up the second clip that we have for folks, just sort of to build on that notion of it being magical and that it being an opportunity for learners. As we look at this clip, just recognize the awe in this young man's face as you're teaching him, the awe in his face that he's going to get something that is mystical. Take it away, Eric.
We're there to give them some of what they think they know, and then show them that there's another side. On one hand, this is the most easy, accessible, non-judgmental, inviting instrument in the world. And on the other hand, this instrument is so deeply, unfathomably mysterious. People don't just come to the concert, they come to the concert and they want to play as well. I'll often give a workshop in advance of the concert. And it gets people into the venue, it gets them excited about the concert, and it gets them hands-on experience.
Probably the best way to have a connection with your audience actually is to empower them to make their own music.
It was fun. It's kind of like they're talking to you specifically and addressing the whole audience at the same time.
That's such a great clip, and I love that young man. But the thing that's really telling about that, and the audience out there that's watching, you notice that it's not segmented to adults or kids. It's the idea of teaching to the population, to the community. I got to open up with this, James. What are you finding is the difference between the teaching that's done with students, children, versus students who are adults?
Well, I would say fear is a major factor, where children are just so willing, as long as you deliver a thing authentically and you bring your passion for the ukulele to the class, they'll do just about anything you ask, and you know that better than anybody.
Yeah.
Adults, as you know, adults are more reticent to fail publicly. And for good reason. They're not used to that anymore. They've had successful careers as XYZ, and now they're being thrust into the beginner's mind publicly again. That's a very extremely intimidating situation. So you almost have to treat the adults a little more like kids, and you can treat the kids a little bit more like adults, and then everything works fine.
Yeah, it's kind of neat because kids will go, "You want me to do that? Okay." Adults will go, "You want me to do that? You want me to do what?"
Yeah, right.
I can't do that.
That's right. Maybe give me 10 hours of practice on my own in a locked soundproof room, and then maybe I'll try it, in front of you. But I love to see the proliferation really of amateur music making among adults. I think this is so important and so good. It's such a good sign. Because you and I have talked about this before, but I think what is that connection? You're asking about kids on one hand and sort of adults on the other, but what is that continuum as kids grow into adults? Like it happens so fast, right? I mean, my son's 5. What?
You're 40. What?
I know. What? So when I would like to see more amateur music making. And, I know you're a big sports fan. You've coached sports. I've coached sports. And you're a math teacher. I enjoyed math in school. It's funny because, when I look at school and I look at the curriculum, when we teach kids math because we expect that in their life, when they become adults, they will do math, right?
Yep.
When we teach kids sports, when we teach them hockey and basketball and soccer, we do that because we expect when they grow up and become adults that they will do sports, that they will remain active and enjoy those sports.
Right.
Great. We don't expect that many of them will go to the professional leagues, but we expect that they'll continue to do that and enjoy it. and et cetera, through all the subjects. We teach them English so they can read books and surf the internet. and then when it comes to music, we teach them music so that, and I hear this so often, we teach them music so that they will learn to be on time, so that they will learn to work well in a group, so that they'll learn the discipline of applying themselves to something difficult, so that they'll blah, 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 blah. It should be so that they will do music.
Yeah.
And I don't see as much of that as I would like. I do see it in the ukulele community, but I find, and increasingly so, which is one of the things I'm so excited about, but I find that what happens with music is that we teach kids music in school, and they go on to either be professionals, which is a tiny sliver of the population,
Very tiny.
Very tiny, or they go on to be music consumers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They go on to patronize iTunes and Spotify and whatever. But I don't see that same correlation that I do in sports and in math and in English. And we should teach them music so they can grow up and do music.
Yeah, it becomes part of their lives. You know, I've talked to you about this in the past. Zoltán Kodály, the Hungarian composer, really stimulated a culture of music making that pervaded the Hungarian people's culture, so that when you go to Hungary, there are amateur symphonies, there are amateur string quartets, there are amateur choirs. They become the clubs that in North America we look at as, you know, the bowling league, the softball league, and really what you're saying, it absolutely resonates with me. It makes so much sense, and that is my compass from when I taught as an elementary school teacher. My compass was I'm trying to give you something that you will have for the rest of your life. Just like when I coached volleyball, that you would have those skills if you ever were part of a backyard volleyball game. You would have some skills. It would look like you knew what you were doing.
Right.
So that as a music student, and I know this is what you're saying as well, James, as a music student, yes, we may have used the ukulele to impart that understanding on you, but really it's about you being able to then say, okay, I get what it means to sing in harmony. And if I'm at a campfire and somebody's singing the melody, I get what it means to sing a third above that. Mm-hmm. And I get what it's going to take to harmonize within the context of the chord. Heck, I could actually bring my ukulele out and I could strum along and sing, mm-hmm. making this a better musical experience for the community that's here around this campfire.
Right, which is very likely to be where the vast majority of people will do their music making. Campfire, I mean, talk about campfire. I mean, anybody who's tried to lead a campfire sing-along knows how complex that is. I mean, we kind of look down our nose a little bit at, oh, well, it's just a campfire. It's not like playing in a string quartet. But if you really look at what's happening at a campfire, and when it really works, when somebody is able to catalyze the people around that campfire, because it always takes one person who can be the leader in that situation, call the song, knows a couple of verses, knows the chords, can play in time, mm-hmm. you know, can do a little instrumental break without the whole thing falling apart. Those mm-hmm. are incredibly sophisticated skills. And if we can get the students to a point that's close to that, we've done a great service. It's a great life skill. You know, I mentioned before that I'm working on a project called Happy Birthday to Uke.
Yeah.
And I was telling you this when we were talking last week. It's not out yet, but it's coming out next month. So happybirthdaytouke.com. Anybody who's listening can check it out. What it is it's a teaching resource where I create 12 very wildly different versions of Happy Birthday. From a hip hop version to a heavy metal version to a Elvis version to a classical, you know, symphonic version, on and on and on, until you get 12 versions of this song. It's the most recognized song in the world, on the friendliest instrument in the world. It is the song that, barring the national anthem and maybe some church hymns, is the song that your students are going to sing more than any other song in their entire life. They're going to sing it multiple times a year, every year, from now until forever, right? This is one of the places where amateur music making really flourishes, is at birthday parties. So let's have some fun with that. Wouldn't that be a fun resource that I could let a student pick what genre they're gonna learn this year for their birthday? 2 weeks leading up to that, I give them the sheet music and we listen to the recording. And on their special day, they get to play their special version of Happy Birthday. You know, that was the idea behind that. And it was all fueled by this interest in amateur music making. And at first you think, Happy Birthday to Uke, that's just a silly project. It's just silly. There is definitely some silly in there, especially the part where I'm doing my Elvis impersonation. There is...
Thank you very much.
You got it. Oh, you've heard it. Great.
Yeah, I have.
Silly is definitely one of the ingredients, and I think that's something you can never totally take out of the ukulele, and I would never want to. But there's a serious side to a project like that as well. To say, look, consuming music is fun. It's great. Having your iPod and having your phone and having it full of 10,000 songs that you never listen to. But the original iPod was the ukulele. The original traveling device, right? That would, I'm getting on a ship called the Raven's Crag, in Portuguese Madeira. Yeah. I know it's going to be months. It ends up being 123 days, that crossing around Cape Horn and up to Hawaii. And I'm going to bring, I was just trying to think if it was Cape Horn.
Yeah.
Cape Horn? Yeah. The bottom of South America.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Destination was Hawaii. Yeah.
That's the destination. Yeah. And I want to bring my music with me. I can only bring a tiny little thing. So I'm going to bring my iPod. I'm going to bring this because there are more songs in this thing than all the iPods in the world combined. That was the reason these instruments traveled, because people wanted to bring all of their music with them. Just in the same way that you would, if you were running out of the house on a long trip, you would grab your phone. Yeah. Well, in those days it was this, and we have lost a little bit in the technology that we rely on so heavily now.
Well, I will tell you, I'm in a lot of airports. Well, not so much the last 18 months, but in a lot of airports, and I see a lot of backpacks with ukuleles in them, which is really quite exciting.
That's a good sign.
James, I know that a big part of who you are now is your teaching initiative. You alluded to it earlier. Just in the time we have left, I'd love to open that dialogue about the importance, and I think you and I share that we believe it is important that when you get in front of a group of students, whether they be adults or children, that you're embracing a couple of very important concepts as a teacher, as an educator. When you're standing in front of a group of students, the kinds of skills and the attitude that you should have going into that activity, that exercise. Let me pose that to you a little bit. Just, that I know one of the most common things I used to hear when I was first starting, oh yeah, I'm 2 lessons ahead of the kids. And I remember a great quote from Chalmers Doan, who would say, if you're 2 lessons ahead of the kids, within 5 minutes, you're behind them. Because you and I mean, you're the prime example of that. You're going to run with whatever an educator gives you, and you're going to be zooming ahead really quickly. So just sort of with that sense, what are some of the key things that you would say to someone who wanted to teach the ukulele? What are some of the concepts that you think are really important for them to keep in mind?
Well, it's funny when you say, I was a good example of that. Looking back, I can see some of the tactics that you were using with me to keep me just
engaged.
To keep me from getting bored, like to keep me there and to keep me fed. You were throwing me scraps all the time, and that's all I needed. I remember after a show one time with the Langley Ensemble, all you said to me when you came over and I was playing something, maybe it was 5'2" or something like that. We were just jamming in the backstage, and I think you said, there's a thing called the triple strum. And like that was it. Yeah. And you just sort of walked away. And I was like, what? the triple what? The what strum? You know, and that was it. I was like, well, if he knows that it exists, that it must be out there. I'm either going to discover it or I'm going to invent it. You know, and so I don't know whether you could do the triple strum at that point. I don't know if that was okay. Well, see, that's amazing.
I can now, by the way, just for the record, because you learned to do it, and I said, "Damn it, I got to learn it too."
You got it. You know, and Chalmers, I know he may have talked about this in his interview with you, but he often did a thing called teaching by rumor, where he would let loose an idea in a community of students and watch it spread from one to the other as the curiosity of each student, just they wanted to know what the other one knew. So there are definitely ways to sort of teach beyond your own abilities. There's no question. You look at the extremely successful gymnastics coaches, who you know, by the look of them, they're in their tracksuits with their handlebar mustache, and you think to yourself, the first thing I think when I see those guys walk out on the mat, I think, you have never even been on a balance beam. That's my first thought. And yet all their proteges are winning the whole Olympics.
Yeah.
So clearly there are ways to teach beyond your own abilities. However, to get to my point finally, my point is probably the very best, easiest, fastest, and most rewarding way to become a better teacher is to spend some time improving your own skills. I know it sounds so obvious, but if you spend some time becoming better at particularly solo ukulele, your ability to juggle the melody and the chords at the same time, not only is it incredibly practical because you can stand at the front of the class and you're playing both parts so that the students can hear the chords and they can hear the picking and they can hear them all in one instrument. That way you're modeling both at the same time. There's also the piece that says you're going to bring that passion and that deeper love for the instrument, that authenticity. That's just going to create an updraft in the class, and your students are going to start respecting you more, believing you more, looking to you more for the mentorship that you can provide. You have something at that point that they want. Without that, without at least some of that, you don't have to be the world's greatest ukulele player to teach ukulele, but without some of that spark of magic that makes the students believe in what you're saying, I just don't see how you can grow a really good program around it.
Yeah, I can't add a word to that. That is perfectly said. And I hope those educators that are out there participating in this webinar are understanding the relevance of it. James, I'm going to tell you something. One of the skills that I never felt I needed to sort of have under my fingers was the ability to play with a pick, right? That's something that like many of you really developed. Well, I'm now teaching a couple of adult ensembles, and I need to get them to be able to do that. And I can't look and say, James, play it for him. I have to go, Peter, play it for him. And so what I've literally done is I've become adept at being able to play that tremolo style measured out so that I can actually put it in a recording and send it off so that you can see it and hear it. And it sounds like it's supposed to sound when you play it. So to your wonderfully stated point, your proficiency as a player counts. Your analysis of the gymnastics coach is excellent. Part of it as an educator is going back to your campfire analogy. You understanding the components to put them together. That's part of being the educator, the leader in that setting. But beyond that, you do have to have some credibility. You have to show that you understand, but can also demonstrate, maybe not even to the same level as the player, but that you have a clear understanding of what that's supposed to be and how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, and we often, let's be honest, we often butted heads about all that stuff. As I got older and stuck with the group into my late teens, and I had more emerging ideas as a young artist about what I wanted to do musically. You and I had times where we were butting heads like crazy musically over musical things in rehearsals, and then we had you remember that one bus ride? There's something magical about a bus ride I was thinking about this morning, going, you know, I don't think we would have had the same conversations in an airplane. You know,
Right.
like an airplane, it's so fascinating. You're like, wow, we're lifting off. Oh, wow, we're landing. You know, oh, wow, they're serving scrambled eggs. You know, like, there's so many things on an airplane that are just so fascinating. Besides, it's so loud, you can't have a conversation.
Correct.
But in a bus, which was the way we always traveled, you know, whether it was a school bus or it was a charter bus.
Well, not to Hawaii, but the rest, yes.
Touche. I remember there was one bus ride where you and I sat together during a time when we were, you know, really not getting along, and musically, yeah. So we just kind of fleshed it out over the course of this. I think it was down to just across the border, wherever we used to go down there to play. Can't remember.
Yep.
And you're talking about having all the components and being the leader within the group. But my problem was, and your problem too, and we solved it through this conversation, was I didn't know when it was time to intervene in that process. Right. And this was still one of my great takeaways from the time that I spent in the group. And I think all teachers should, you know, have a listen to this idea that we came up with, which is, when the teacher comes to the ensemble or their students, whatever it is, it could be one student, with a new piece, some kind of exercise or exploration, there is a moment of sort of expansion of possibilities, the big bang of that moment. And that sort of goes, and those are the moments where you can chip in with, hey, what if we did this chord or that chord, or why don't we add this section or add this harmony part? And everybody's chucking little ingredients into the pot, you know, eye of newt, you know, and everybody's got a little thing that they want to throw in.
Yeah.
And then that expansion stops. Yeah. And at that point, the director or the teacher or the leader, it could be somebody around a campfire, doesn't matter.
Yep.
They take the reins back after having released them for that first phase. They take the reins back and they pull things together into a point. And after that moment of having the reins taken back by the leader, after that point is not the time to add your suggestion. Oh, hey, what if we do this diminished 7 chord over the... No, we passed that point. Yeah. And that alone, just that structure of expansion and then contraction as a way of sort of conceptualizing this shared creative experience. Yeah. Which can be an absolute mess if you have no conceptual framework for it. That I was able to hang in there for another 3 years, I think, after that. Yeah. Because of that one conversation.
Yeah. You know, for all teachers out there, here's the essence of it. 3 points. 1, there has to be a level of proficiency on the part of the learner to be able to engage in that creative process. That's 1. 2, the creative process is critical because it allows an outlet for your ideas to be tried, heard, and activated. So, to James's point, and actually the other student along the road that did the exact same thing was son Paul, who is now directing the group. And what would happen is we would actually say, okay, let's try that idea as an ensemble. Let's try it. Okay, who else has an idea? The concept is that you're allowing the learner to engage in the creative process to bring together the arrangement so that who owns it? We all do. Mm-hmm. Here's the third piece though. At some point, you need to say, okay, here's the piece. This is the way we're going to perform it. It may not be performed that way forever, but for now, here's how we're going to perform it. Why? Because if we don't bring it to close, we're forever just going to be playing with the arrangement. It'll never get presented. Yeah. So over my right shoulder, all the recordings that are enclosed in there, those are all, especially in the later years, part of a creative process. And then the leadership piece, the piece the teacher then engages in is, okay, for now, this is where we are. This is how it will be. And, you know, James, you were part of a process we used to call, it was called Strings Attached, where we'd get up on a stage in front of 700 people. And in front of those 700 people, we'd take 10 minutes to learn a song and perform it. In 10 minutes, we'd go from 0, nothing, to a piece that was performed with an intro, an outro, 3-part harmony, an instrumental break, a solo. The bass player would have their part. It would be complete. You know what? The entire process during the 10 minutes, other than when I introduced the piece, the chord structure, and the lyric, the rest of it was, you guys figure out the harmonies. You guys, you got where the rhythm is, share amongst yourselves. And 10 minutes later, it's performed as a complete arrangement to the absolute bewilderment of the people sitting in the audience going, how did they do that?
Yeah.
Well,
It was really powerful.
Because it was exactly what you and I discussed on that bus trip. At some point, there had to be the teacher saying, okay, we're there now. This is the way it's going to be. Mm-hmm. And the notion that you as an educator have the confidence of the learners, have the ground rules set out so that everybody's buying in, that's the real meat of education. You can pick whatever arrangement you want. There are no rules around what gets played or doesn't get played, what gets taught doesn't get taught. What's really critical is that you're in a position to be able to say to the learners, I want you involved. I want you as part of it. It's not just me giving it to you. And
right.
this instrument, wow, it's powerful to do that. James.
Absolutely. And I want you involved, but at these times, and everybody understands that playing field. And you know, what we're talking about is, is the reason that JHUI, that program, exists. And the reason JHUI exists is because it's almost impossible to write down the good stuff.
Yeah.
What we're talking about right now is that ephemeral good stuff that teachers learn by doing, that the teachers learn from one another, that teachers learn mostly from their students, actually.
Yes.
And that's the stuff that it's very difficult, I would say almost impossible to write down in a book. And that's why I started JHUI. My dad and I started JHUI together because he said to me, he's absolutely right, again, I hate to admit it, he said,
Happy Father's Day, Barry.
Exactly. He said, anybody can write a book. Now, it's not easy to write a book. You got to put some words on the paper, and you got to choose some arrangements and do some ink and printing and binding. But that is not the teaching. Anybody can write a book, but if nobody really knows how to use the book, then the book is just ink on paper. Right. What's really important is the teaching between the pages, teaching between the lines. This is why JHUI exists. This is why we have a community. This is why we have 2 sessions a year that guide teachers at 3 different levels of proficiency through these through this pedagogy. And we're there with them every step of the way, because it's not about just ordering the book and getting it in the mail. In some ways, I wish it were, because it would be a lot easier. Yeah. But everybody knows. Everybody who's ever tried to write a book or has written a book, or anybody who has ever bought a book thinking it was going to be the solution to their problems, knows that it's the real learning and the real magic is between the lines. Very much like the Harry Potter books, where you had the magic platform 9 3/4. That's where you would get on the train, right, to Hogwarts. It's a little bit like that with teaching. It's between the lessons. It's off the page. It's all the stuff that we're talking about here that really makes it work, and everything else is just ink on paper.
Yeah, I think, and what you're saying is absolutely correct. It's the interaction, that allows for that growth to happen. It's the organic process that you're engaged in when you're playing and teaching and learning. There is something to be said, and I'm interested in your comments on this. There's something to be said for a foundation. And one of the things that I just think is so valuable is for our students to understand that the nature of the instrument gives you melody, harmony, as Chalmers would say, rhythm, and the greatest of these is rhythm. Right? That having a basic understanding of what it is that your fingers are doing, what it is that you're hearing, is critical to then building on. Your thoughts around that, James?
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that kind of anatomy of music. Melody, harmony, rhythm, the rule of 3s. We really like that when things break into 3 parts. It's very easy to conceptualize a small, a medium, and a large. I also think, and I know based on my conversations with Chalmers over the years, that he has started to expand that framework too. And I remember Gary, he was talking about Gary Carr, one of the bass players, wonderful bass player that he had hired for a year to teach in Halifax. Because Chalmers' thing was he was going to get the best people. He was going to run this music program, and he was going to get the best people to come and teach. He got Gary Carr to come and teach in Halifax for a year. That was Chalmers' mojo. He could entice these world-class players into teaching at his program. So Gary Carr agreed to teach for a year, and this is the story that Chalmers tells. He's going hard all year about melody, harmony, and rhythm. These are the three pillars of music, and la-di-da. Chalmers just selling it. And as he is dropping off Gary to the airport to go back home, Gary turns to him, and the last thing he says over his shoulder is tone.
Yeah.
And then he walks onto the plane, as if to say, there's more to it than that. There are more things. And, over the years, I've tried to convince Chalmers that one of those fundamental elements of music, I've tried to get my 2 cents in there. And my 2 cents is style. That's my word, style. I want to add that in there with as much weight as melody, harmony, rhythm, tone. Style. Yeah. It's not so much what you're playing, but how you're playing it. With what kind of artful spin are you putting on it? How much of you do I hear in the notes, and how personal is it? How human is it? That's style to me. And so I'm very interested in expanding on that definition. But what was the question?
I think, quite frankly, it's fun. The hour has just flown by. James, you and I, we probably just need to follow this up with another session sometime in the future. I'll speak to Eric and Mary about that.
I love it. If my last comment in this whole session is, what was the question? I think that's perfect. Yeah, it couldn't be better.
I want to thank you so much. Just getting ready for this session, and then the time we've spent on air here has just been so wonderful for me. I have so much appreciated who you are as a musician, as a teacher, as an educator of the community, and all the work that you've done. I do think of you as another son, and that's no aspersions to Barry, and certainly not to your mom. But it's been a real pleasure to be able to be together here today. I do look forward to the next time. And for those tuning in, I hope you've gleaned from this a lot of the essence of teaching, of taking this instrument and utilizing the ukulele in a way that allows you to have your students express themselves and to develop the ability to have music as something for life. In our next month's session, we're going to bring together some of the same folks that James and I met with way back in January. We're going to talk about festivals and festival opportunities as we go forward, post-COVID. And again, we very much look forward to having you tune in next month, being obviously the month of July. And in the meantime, James, again, thank you. Thank you to the NAMM Foundation. Everybody, be well.
Thanks, Peter.